So hello and welcome back. So we're on to our second video on emotional intelligence. So the first video was all about what emotional intelligence is and how to recognize it in ourselves. And this one is all about how to recognize emotional intelligence in others. So before we do that, let's have a look at some of the workplace emotions that we might experience whilst we are working with children. So imagine that this bunch of flowers, each of those beautiful roses represent a different emotion. So as I speak them, I would like you to let me know if you've experienced any of these. Joy, love, frustration, empathy, fear, happiness. Are there any others that you can think of? So what I'm trying to allude here is that as humans, we all experience the full range of emotions. And when we can understand that each of us are the same when it comes to experiencing emotion, we can have more empathy and a better understanding for each other when something comes up in the workplace. So let's have a look at that a little bit further as we go on now. Okay, so understanding, I guess it's really important for us to understand the difference between an emotion and a mood. So off the top of your head now, what do you think constitutes an emotion versus a mood? So emotions are usually caused by a specific person or event. So remember in the first video we had the sensation and then our perception of that, and then came the emotion. So this is why emotions are often caused by something, because it's how we perceive that experience that leads to our emotion. It's usually brief. It usually flares up from within. It comes up and we experience it. So imagine seeing a child do something that makes you laugh and you feel a real sense of joy. Imagine and try and really remember or embody that feeling of how it rose up through your body and you experienced it in that brief moment. It comes with distinct facial expressions. So often the way that we experience or react to an experience via our emotions, our body language will reflect that. It's action oriented and it's also very specific. An emotion is very specific. Whereas moods, sometimes we're just in a mood and we have no idea why. Has that happened to you before? It happens to me all the time. Moods often last longer than emotions do. So as we can see, remember the emotions are usually brief. A mood is something that we experience perhaps for the whole day. There's no distinct expressions. Often we try, and if we're feeling negative in our moods, we'll often try and even hide those physical expressions of that. Our moods are very subjective and they're a lot more general. So you can see here that emotions are something that I guess both of these come up unconsciously. However, the emotion is more caused by a specific event, whereas the mood, it's a bit more wishy-washy in terms of how we experience it. So when we're thinking about identifying and assessing emotional states, we really need to not just consider how somebody says that they feel, because many people won't say how they feel. There's a lot of non-verbal cues that come up. So let's have a look at some of those. So we have facial expressions. So think about a child. You always know how a child feels by their facial expressions. Eye contact, whether that's happening or not. Perhaps you ask somebody, if you notice that somebody seems a little bit off today and you say, oh, are you okay today? They may look away. No, or yes. Gestures, any of the hand gestures or body gestures that we might use. Paralanguage. So paralanguage is it's the pitch of our voice, the speed of how we speak, maybe even it's kind of the subtle nuances of communication. So whether when you ask a question, there's a hesitation in the answer. And then our body movement. So all of these things can help us identify and assess the emotional state of others. Each of them, when they all come together, it really helps to build a picture. of how somebody is feeling. Dan Goleman has, we've adapted this from Dan Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, so that we can have a look about how it impacts us in the workplace. So emotional intelligence, first and foremost, starts with self-awareness. So we've kind of established that throughout the videos so far. So self-awareness includes understanding ourselves, understanding our strengths and weaknesses, understanding whether or not we have self-confidence, and whether we are open to learning and developing new skills. So kind of assessing where we are at, how we are, how we function emotionally in this moment. So once we are aware of ourselves, we can move to self-management. So self-management is about how we can adapt, how we can self-control. So this is something that we work with a lot in children, is that sense of self-control. So how we're feeling, and instead of just lashing out if we're feeling frustrated, for example, talking about how we can use our words instead. However, often self-control isn't something that we think about when it comes to our own emotions. It then goes around to relationship management. So once we're self-aware, once we can manage our emotions, or our outbursts of emotion, we can have a look at how we manage those as well. So this is about the way that we can manage them is how we communicate around them, how we use our emotions to resolve conflict, how we can be team players and inspire and support others. And lastly, that all flows around to social awareness. So as you can see, it starts with the self-awareness, which is very much about yourself. That moves towards management and regulation. Then how we interact in terms of relationship management, and then social awareness in general. So this has an understanding of this basically embeds an awareness of cultural competence. It is about being an empathetic listener, whether or not you pick up on emotional cues, and whether or not you are somebody who actually not just looks but seeks to understand other people in their diversity. So speaking of diversity, all of us live in a very diverse workplace. So you can see on this puzzle here, there's so many different ways that we can look at diversity. It's not just about ethnicity and religion or gender, but there's also our sexual orientation, our physical abilities, our skills, our culture, our experiences, the languages we use, our job level and our thinking styles. All of these weave into a diverse workforce. So it's actually by law, it's important that we follow the Equal Employment Opportunity legislation, because this enables all of us to thrive in a workplace that's free from discrimination. Nothing will shut down a person more if they are feeling judged or discriminated purely because of their background or who they are. So it's really important for us to, when we are in the workplace, and not just with children, but also with families and community groups, it's really important that we are open to diverse, to the workplace that we're working in, all of the diverse cultures and backgrounds and nationalities and skills and experiences of each other. And when we're thinking about employment in terms of people that we're going to work with, it's also important to endeavour to recruit people who are facing barriers to employment. So for example, when we have a look at physical abilities, you may have somebody who is in a wheelchair. So when we're thinking about working as an educator, it's really important to understand that we may need to make changes in the workplace to accommodate for different diverse backgrounds. So continuing on from diversity, it's really something that I find fascinating about emotional intelligence is having an understanding about how different cultures display their emotional expressions, So having a look in many Asian cultures, for example, China and Japan, they actually do not display anger. So it's part of their culture to not display anger. So in the workplace, if you work with somebody who is from China or Japan, just have an awareness around part of their culture is not about displaying anger. So they may be experiencing sensations in their body about things that they don't agree with, but it's actually not part of their culture to share that. So we need to think about how we can get around that. In Germany, smiling tends to be for affection rather than business. So if you're working with somebody of German background, perhaps they may see the workplace as a place that's very much a place of business. So it may be quite transactional rather than smiling and joking around like many of us do. In India and Indonesia, they avoid public displays of affection. So how would that pan out in terms of the workplace? Would there be less cuddles and smiles and mucking around? And then you can see the others. We've got the United Kingdom about avoiding conflict or emotional displays in public, and Italy is quite the opposite, where it's all about displaying their emotions, their big feelings. So yeah, it's really important to, if you have people of different backgrounds and experiences, it's really important for us to try and get more of an awareness of diverse cultures, and because then we can understand each other more. So let's have a look at some culturally intelligent behaviours. So in terms of communication, ways that we would need to think about ways that we could adjust our communication style and support others to do the same as well. When we're thinking about the organisational needs, have a think about how we can accommodate the needs of our whole diverse team. If everybody's feeling like their needs are being met, productivity increases. So it's really, really important, not just for our self-esteem, but also for getting the work done. We're very, very busy in our roles in early childhood. We all wear many hats and there's so many things we can do. So you can really see how that sense of being accepted for who you are in an emotionally intelligent team is a really great way to increase productivity. So when we can really understand one another, we can really start to go beyond expectations. We can really start to show innovative and new ways of getting things done because we are understanding where people come from and how they go about their experiences. We can then harness that within the workplace. And proactive management. So no matter where you are in your team, we all have something to offer. And so offering coaching and diversity before issues arise is really, really important so that we can all work together. Continuing on, we all come with, I guess each of us comes to a team, not just as a bunch of individuals, but we are actually, each of us has a role and that needs to be understood by each of the other members so that we can really work together as a well-oiled machine. And I love this second sentence here, and it talks about how effectively we work when we can be assigned tasks and roles that come most naturally to us. So this is really about working with strengths, and we'll be looking at that further in the next video. But it's really important not just to understand where we come from culturally, but also what comes really naturally to us, because they're the things that we can most naturally share with one another and use as part of our workplace roles. So decision making and emotions. So remember, we've talked about how emotions are a lot more immediate than moods. And so that means that we need to be aware of them when they come up before we can make decisions. So some ways to go about that, and when we're thinking about this in relation to others, is to really take time to listen and look for those non-verbal cues in one another. Listening is such a dying art. It really, really is. We are so busy all of the time that often we are just hearing what somebody's saying and already formulating in our heads what we are going to respond with. So just if you take nothing else out of this video, just really work to improve your listening skills, because that is going to make you a much more emotionally intelligent person, and looking for those non-verbal cues in one another, because that's how we can really be present with one another and build those deep relationships. So we need to also pay close attention to interactions between team members. What sort of non-verbal cues are going on there? We can work with others to identify their emotional states and also how they would then respond in different situations. So this can even just happen in conversations in a staff meeting, or even just one-on-one, talking about how we're feeling and how we might respond to those. It's important that we consider our own emotions and how other team members make us feel, because that's part of emotional intelligence as well. And then before we make a decision, we need to think about our responses first. Give yourself time to answer. Sometimes it might take us a little while to articulate how we're feeling about something, and therefore how we want to move forward from there. So it's totally okay at any time to say, I need time before I make this decision. Can I come back and chat with you about this soon? And once you have gathered what you want to say together, it's about being clear and realistic with your response. So thank you for participating again in this video. I'm really looking forward to our final session together. And yeah, hopefully this is really, really informative to you and really helping you understand not just yourself, but each other in the workplace.